All right. So welcome to our afternoon session on data lake analytics for the admin with my dear friend Tillmann, Eitelberg, and myself. And again, as usual, we have to thank our sponsors, especially the company that Björn always likes, Smart Casual Data Design, which is a complete new company and completely unknown for all other sponsors. So let's welcome this new company. And
don't make
Tillmann.
Just stupid jokes.
Yeah, come on, these jokes are nice. All right, so Tillmann, maybe just introduce yourself for all the folks who may not know you, and let's start our session.
I'm Tillmann. I'm chapter leader of the PAS regional group here in Rhineland, so where I'm sitting now. And I'm also vice president of PAS Germany, data platform MVP, and works for OH22, which is the company behind Smart Casual Data Design.
Cool. And myself, I'm Oliver. I'm also leading the data platform community in Germany. So the DBCC 2020 is something that we try to invent it as a community edition for virtual events. And I'm very happy that Eric took the lead to do that as a replacement, so to say, for our SQL Saturday in Munich. I'm also from this kind of cryptical company called OH22. And we will have a kind of session that is something that we never did before. So like Benny this morning, the DBCC is the first time we do this session. So hopefully everything will went fine. I cross my fingers that the hardware of Tillmann will work. Okay, what is this session all about? So
just before we start, just to inform you that I will go to the slides and Oliver will talk, and after that we will switch, because we don't like to switch the PCs completely or the notebooks, the sharing, so that maybe that I'm something a little bit late what Oliver's talking about.
Yeah, that's no problem. I will push you to switch the slides. You are my demo monkey. That's always fine. Okay. So what is this session all about? We thought a little bit based on our experience with our projects that we are doing for the last, let's say, 2.5 years, where we do a lot of migration of data warehouse workload, analytical workload into the cloud. And one of the things that you normally do in these kind of scenarios is that you think about, okay, the people who are working behind the scenes with the technology, both of them hopefully are community members. We all worked with SQL Server maybe for a long time, and we have DBAs who administer and optimize the SQL Server as such, and the whole landscape, etc. And now these people get into something like a data lake, and something like, okay, fine if Microsoft and all the other big cloud hyperscale vendors push this kind of technology as the leading thing, how to solve your data problems in the future. But yes, this is something different than, let's say, my good old relational machine, where I have my DMVs, where I have stuff that I normally do to control these kind of things. And now I have this kind of data lake, which is, let's say, an unlimited storage. But how can I control this in a similar fashion, or in a, let's say, with a similar kind of results than I do it with my SQL Server? Is there anything that I can do to control this kind of beast? That was our intention for this kind of session. And of course, when you are doing these things, you may ask yourself some kind of questions. But first of all, what is the data lake all about? And what is the difference between something like a relational data store as such and a data lake? And in a data lake, we have let's say, these kind of different zones. And we here at OH22, we have raw, quality, and curated zone, but doesn't matter. Yeah, you can choose whatever you call it. Databricks call it raw, silver, and gold, etc., etc. So you try to, let's say, work with data that come into the data lake, and then it gets somehow in a kind of value chain. The data gets better and better and specialized and enriched, and maybe also it gets somehow optimized for people who are consuming it, maybe in a whatever denormalized format or something like this. Yeah. So similar to something like when you do this in a database, when you have a staging area where you also do these kind of tasks, the data lake does this with files and does this on a file system. Now you do not have a kind of dedicated engine that is doing all these things. So you need to have more stuff that can handle, let's say, more the control, more the governance, and so on. And for us, it's like this: when we are looking to it, we say, okay, we have this kind of technical role that we call data engineer, that is taking this data, like in a factory, in a manufacturing thing kind of view, taking the data and creating more and more and more value out of it. But on the other side, you create a lot of, let's say, maybe deduplication of data. So you have something like a copy of the source system, and then you go further and qualify that even further. But you need to have some kind of control where the data is, what you can do with this. And these leads us to questions that maybe an admin will ask himself when he is looking to the data lake. And this is something that we try to answer a little bit. So when we look at the questions that an admin asks in terms of the data lake, and this is the time, Tillmann, when you switch the slide. Yes, thank you. I think, or we think that an administrator of it would like to see, first of all, okay, I want maybe look into something like, how is my performance of data lake? Is there anything that I can control in terms of a performance in a cloud storage? Is there something that I can control? How fast, let's say, my ingest is, how much ingest we have, etc., etc. As well as you normally do with, let's say, a database, you have a lot of metadata, how your tables are structured, what the tables are, you have schemas, etc. You have all this stuff available. And of course, if you want to administer your data lake, it would be quite nice in this huge amount of files and structures, etc., to have some kind of data of the data that you maintain. And it's quite interesting if there is something that can help us to manage that. So, of course, the DBA says, okay, I want to have my metadata. And yes, of course, when we look into something like, that was too fast, Tillmann. I'm not finished with that slide. When you look into something like, normally, when you look on a relational database, you, of course, want to look into something like your log files, etc. You want to analyze what kind of events are going on this machine. And of course, you would like to set up some kind of rules or some kind of alerts that say, okay, if something like this happens, do this and this. If maybe my disk space in my relational database is full, please do whatever is appropriate to help this and give me an information about it. Or I want to have some kind of rules on top of it that give me the possibility to restrict something, not just based on access restriction, but also on the way how you maybe do a naming convention of your stored procedure in a relational database, but also a naming convention of your file system in a data lake. So all these different things are questions we think a DBA can answer. And this is something that, of course, Microsoft can address in a certain way. There are certain services, and now you can switch the slide. There are certain services that can do this. And we want to give you a kind of overview what's available, what you can do. It is definitely not a complete sufficient overview, and it's not a deep dive. You cannot do this in 30 minutes, especially when I'm in the session and talking too much. So this is something we just want to have some kind of, we have some small demos, and we want to jump into each of the different points of these questions I asked. So the first thing we want to look at is metadata. And here with metadata, I copied this a slide that I really like from Melissa Coates, also an MVP, and she tried to set up the way how you can look into storage in the cloud, and especially when we talk about storage, then the storage as an Azure Data Lake. And you see there's a lot of, let's say, configuration information to it, but there is also the possibility to store metadata, for example, on a blob container or on the blob itself. Yeah. So I hope you can see that kind of little screen here. In the Azure environment, we have the possibility to add, we have some standard metadata, like any kind of whatever version, type, size, etc., etc. But we also have the possibility to define per container, per file individually, we can define a kind of key value pair set of metadata. This is stored with the file itself and enables us to look into this kind of metadata and have the possibility to, if we, for example, and you see that on the little screen on the left side at the bottom, for example, if you go into your data lake with the Storage Explorer and you click on a file and you have on the right mouse click, you have all this kind of metadata that has been defined. And now we have my demo monkey and Tillmann will show it. Yeah. So for example, you see here, he has clicked on the file, and then what we have defined here as metadata. So it's just a simple sample. You have the standard on top, like the properties, but you have this kind of metadata key value pair, and you can add this to the file. One thing that we discovered when we tried this kind of thing out is this works in the cloud, but as soon as you take the file down to your normal Windows storage, you will not have this kind of information.
Quick demo here.
Yeah. Exactly. And now, how can we get this done? And maybe Tillmann, just show us this kind of little PowerShell example, how to deal with metadata on the lake.
It's just a quick demo. So we just set a context to our storage account and define some variables for the file system and for the directory. So the file system is a container in the data lake. And then we can query the data lake and get different properties out of all the files we have in the data lake. Took a while, and then you can see we get all the different information about these files. If I go down, I have here a query to get a specific for the file I showed before in the Storage Explorer, the AZ data client. I can query the metadata, and you can see the conference DBCC metadata. If I now go back to the client and say here, maybe again, I add metadata and say, hey, here speakers, Oliver, Tillmann, save that. And if I now go back and query it again, I will hopefully get the correct new metadata. Oh, come on.
So what does it mean from an administrational perspective? it is something that you can organize anything that you store in your data lake with additional information. So depending on what you like to search for, this is something where you can create a kind of set to analyze based on the metadata specific data you are working with in your data lake, and you can identify this. So this could be things like cost centers. This could be things like data quality standards, etc., etc. So this gives you always the possibility to look into this a little bit deeper. What Microsoft offers over the time, and the right one is currently in preview. Also, Microsoft gives us more possibilities in terms of metadata. So on the one side, we can search the whole metadata and with Azure Search. But on the other side, which is not currently available for the data lake itself, but just for your information, you get this kind of blob index service with tags. That's an additional information that is stored outside the file. So Microsoft offers here a functionality that you can add a more searchable way of doing that metadata with tags that you can add to the system. And the next page is...
And just as an information here, I think, because we don't have it in the slides, is the query accelerator. Just as an information, it's an additional tool set now on the data lake and the blob storage, where you can also not only query the metadata of files, you can also query inside of files without have additional services or something like that. Just via PowerShell, you can query also inside of files.
Yep, exactly. So without any kind of engine. Here you see the differences between the, let's say, traditional metadata and this blob index task. The traditional metadata doesn't cost you anything. There is a fixed costs for the blob index that happens, but both are in a way that you can later on query the data by this kind of tags or by this kind of metadata that helps you to organize, let's say, your data lake and analyze it from a more administrational or more governance part. All right.
Exactly. That was our demo. Some more information about the activity log. So if you go to your Azure portal, on the left side, in the small pane on the left side, you have the activity log. And this is a general log which provides information about everything happens on the subscription level. So that means if you change authorization, if you add new users to your directory or something like that, everything of these events that activity log, and you can easily go through the portal to this activity log and show all of this information. You can also send these information to different endpoints, such as Log Analytics. We will talk about that hopefully later. The Event Hub or a storage account. And especially with the Event Hub, you have much more possibilities to analyze your data. So you can stream it then to your Event Hub, set things like Stream Analytics on it. So if you have a lot of users who are working on the data lake, then that may be a solution to check all the incoming data and all the different changes on the information. And also the activity log for sure can be queried via CLI or PowerShell. This is a small PowerShell script, just as an information that you can set the all the profiles you can use in the activity log. So you can set via PowerShell, but I think that yeah, in Azure for sure you can maintain everything with PowerShell. What I like really for the activity log is, which doesn't it's not here for the storage part, but if you have VMs, then you can also go to the activity log and you have a change history, and you can see there if somebody maybe changed the hardware profile of a VM, you can also see the difference here in the activity log. So for, that's not a solution for the storage part, but for VMs, I really like this feature. Next part, what we also have is Azure Policies. Azure Policies is a feature which is also not a service which you can activate directly somewhere in a resource group or something like that. It's based on your Azure AD. And this is like a global service where you can add policies to enforce organizational standards to a specific resource or a resource group, something like that. And with that, you can control the different resources. You can enforce that the storage account, as an example, has set up log analytics or something like that. And the Azure policy uses JSON format to form the complete logic and to define the rules. The important part here is that you can, with Azure policies, you can prevent different actions, but it's not based on your role-based access control. It's based completely on the policy. So maybe that you are allowed to create a VM or something like that, or a storage explorer, but you are not allowed to create a storage explorer without encryption. So then Azure policy will deny the creation of the storage explorer if you don't enable directly encryption on that. Yeah, you can choose up to 10 different pre-built Azure policies. I will show it now to you. But you can also create your own policies in the portal. Just jump over to.
Yeah. So while you are doing this, so one of the things that I think it's quite interesting in the whole scenario is when you compare this, let's say, with the SQL Server as such. Of course, in SQL Server, you had your Windows Server underneath that had some kind of functionalities as such, but there was really a lot of specific tooling inside the SQL Server. With the Azure Cloud, we now need to combine different services that are much more generic sometimes, but we can use these services to achieve the same kind of thing that we had on-prem with a dedicated product.
Exactly. So I'm here now in the policy. So I'm in the portal. We have our resource group, DBCC International, and then we have here policies. If I go there, you can see the different policies I've created. So I have 2 different policies at the moment. So one is a default policy, which is enabled through our subscription. And if I go there, you will see 4 different errors. 4 are not compliant here. And this is one rule. And as you can see here, that there is a rule now on so a policy on our storage account which don't allow public access, or it should be disallowed public access. And because I have 4 different storage accounts in this resource group, this audit fails or is not compliant. And as you can see also here, if I go back, I have one which is compliant here. This one says, okay, you need diagnostic logs in your data lake should be enabled. And you can go here and say assignments, assign policy, and then I can define a new policy, and you can just choose some of the predefined policies, and there I can maybe also say that Azure Defender should be enabled for a storage account, or restricted network access, something like that. And then after selection, I can just say review and create this policy. And now this policy will check all my resources in this resource group after a specific time span, which I show later on the slides again. Yeah, and so you can define different policies. There's another thing which is called initiative. This is if you have multiple policies that you can combine to one initiative so that you directly can implement more like a global standard to your data lake or to your resources in Azure. And what I mentioned before with time here is that if you create a new policy, it will take some time to evaluate the different resources. So for existing resources, we need 30 minutes until the policy will evaluate existing resources. Okay.
Cool.
That was the policies. Then another part, we have log analytics. So log analytics is the big or the primary tool in the Azure portal for writing log queries. It's based on the Azure Data Explorer, and so it uses the language KQL or CACL. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. And
CACL is good.
CACL is good. And with that, you can write data or you can query different data sources or resources in Azure and select it then in the log analytics. So this is you can also use these log queries with in alert rules, with dashboards, and also with PowerShell. And so just a small query here. It's where you can just select with the KQL from security events, and then you can define what you like to event and so which where condition and the summarize this part. I'm a little bit fast here because I think Oliver will also have some part at the end. So we have classic metrics. Just as an information, there are classic metrics at the moment in the Azure portal or in Azure, which will be retired on the 31 of August in 23. I think that's a lot of time to change it to the new Azure Monitor. But just to inform you, you will see it directly in the portal. There's also in brackets, you see the word classic. And if you have new setups, new environments in Azure, don't choose these classic metrics. Just go to the Azure Monitor, and then you can use the log analytics.
So the last thing is, of course, we as a DBA want to, or as an admin, want to understand when things happen that I need to be aware. So, for example, if somebody is dropping large amounts of files into my data lake, and this is something I really need to understand and need to see. So what's useful here is that you can build in Azure, you can build alerts on top of that. So you have to set up a kind of scope. So for example, the scope will be, in our case, the data lake. And then you define some kind of conditions where you say, okay, maybe at an ingest over the last 30 minutes, should be above 1 terabyte or something like this. And then if this condition happens, or if this criteria happens, run an action. That could be, you can send me an email, or you can trigger a runbook, or you can trigger a webhook or something like this. That then gives me as an administrator an information or an automated reaction on something I defined upfront. We have some screenshots on the last slides here that we will go to the site. But just in total, this means, of course, there are in the data lake itself not really very specific services that you can use as admin, but you can use the generic services that Microsoft in Azure itself deploys for a lot of other services that Microsoft has, and you can customize these services in a similar fashion so that you can achieve what an administrator would like to see on a data lake, that you, for example, know your policies, that you can enforce the policies, that you know the data that is in there with metadata, and that you, of course, can create rules and alerts that inform you when something bad is happening.
And what you can also often do is you can also combine these different services or different functionalities together with, yeah.
Exactly. So with this, we are already through, I think, with our 30 minutes. Again, thank you for the sponsors. Again, thank you for your audience. I hope this was just a good impression, a starting point for you guys to have a look into these kind of services and maybe make use of it. If you have any kind of additional questions, This chat will be still around. I will stop the video now, but you can definitely ask questions later on. So feel free to drop this into the meeting chat. Otherwise, have fun for the additional sessions that are coming up, and then have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.